Ancient coastlines once whispered with the deals of smugglers moving treasures in the dark. This was the Bronze Age black market, a shadow economy that secretly powered the rise and fall of empires. By the end of this, you will understand how these hidden networks fundamentally reshaped the ancient world. We will uncover why merchant smugglers risked everything, what undeciphered scripts might reveal about their operations, and whether the infamous Sea Peoples were ruthless raiders or savvy traders. This journey into the past reveals the timeless drivers of ambition and survival. What do you believe is the true cost of a secret kept for 3,000 years? A lone boat slips onto a darkened shore, its hull scraping softly against the sand. Under a sliver of moon, shadowy figures exchange heavy sacks for glinting metal, their voices hushed, their movements swift. This was the birth of a shadow economy, an illicit network that grew like a hidden vine around the towering structures of legitimate Bronze Age trade. Great empires from Egypt to Mesopotamia and the Aegean were officially connected by royal ships carrying diplomatic gifts and taxed commodities, but alongside these authorized routes, a parallel system thrived. As historian Eric H. Klein points out, this underground market was fueled by a potent mix of political instability and an insatiable demand for luxury. When palace control weakened or trade routes were disrupted, the black market adapted with ruthless efficiency. The incentives were enormous. Official tariffs imposed by royal palaces could be staggeringly high, making a smuggler's discount incredibly attractive. Resource scarcity meant that a merchant who could secretly deliver a shipment of Cypriot copper or Lebanese cedar to a desperate buyer could name his price. The most sought-after contraband reads like a catalogue of ancient desires: precious metals like tin and silver, elephant ivory, rare purple dyes, and exquisite textiles. These items bypassed official channels entirely, moving through a chain of trusted contacts and quiet coves. The port city of Ugarit serves as a perfect example. This thriving hub on the Syrian coast was a crossroads of the civilized world, and its very legitimacy provided the perfect cover for illicit activities. Its crowded quays and numerous warehouses allowed smuggled goods to be lost in the chaotic flow of commerce, easily diverted before any royal tax collector could take his share. Does this not sound familiar? The way modern black markets still operate in the gaps of official systems, exploiting demand and circumventing authority. The desire to profit from what is forbidden or taxed appears to be a constant in human history, but none of this could function without the people who made it happen, the clever and daring individuals who orchestrated these covert deals from the shadows. These powerful merchants were masters of dual identities. In public, they were pillars of the community, their wealth displayed in fine linens and generous public donations. But in private, they orchestrated a different kind of trade, one that flowed beneath the official records. Historian Robert Drews emphasizes how these individuals expertly exploited gaps in royal enforcement. Their primary cargo was power itself, the very materials that built and armed civilizations. Tin and copper were the lifeblood of the age, the essential ingredients for bronze, and controlling their secret supply was a path to immense influence and wealth. Their methods were sophisticated and timeless. Bribery was a standard tool, a quiet exchange of silver to ensure a customs official looked the other way or a ship's manifest went unexamined. Communication required even greater subtlety. They likely used coded messages, perhaps embedded within otherwise mundane business tablets, discussing shipments of grain or pottery, while secretly referring to a cargo of illegal ivory or precious metals. Their success depended on building robust alliances, forming quiet partnerships with local rulers who wanted a cut of the profit, and with other traders who could move goods along a trusted chain. A fascinating glimpse into this world comes from the Amarna letters, a diplomatic archive from ancient Egypt. One clay tablet contains an accusation from the king of Elashia, modern Cyprus, complaining that Egyptian subjects had intercepted and smuggled his shipment of copper. This was not a low-level crime. It implicated well-connected merchants who used their position to divert royal cargo for private gain. Can you envision the constant calculation these merchants faced, weighing the lure of staggering profit against the ever-present risk of exposure and ruin? Their story is one of audacious ambition, proving that the most effective smugglers are often those you would least suspect, and their entire shadow empire relied on a silent partner, a system of record-keeping so cryptic that its secrets would remain locked away for millennia. These maritime navigators held the sea's secrets in their hands. While merchants orchestrated deals from safe harbor, these sailors were the ones who braved the open water, turning plans into profit. They were the vital link, the beating heart of the entire smuggling operation. According to nautical archaeologist George F. Bass, their skill was unparalleled. They navigated not by simple landmarks, but by an intimate understanding of stars, currents, and weather patterns, knowledge passed down through generations. This mastery allowed them to plot courses through treacherous, less patrolled waters, using sudden squalls and patches of dense fog as cover to slip past any royal patrols that might be hunting for untaxed cargo. Their vessels were their homes and their tools. The famous Uluburun shipwreck, discovered off the coast of Turkey, offers a stunning snapshot of this dual life. Its hull contained a king's ransom, a mix of legitimate trade goods and what was almost certainly smuggled wealth, from African ebony and Baltic amber to Canaanite jewelry, and vast quantities of raw copper and tin. This was the perfect disguise, a ship that looked official on any inspection but carried hidden treasures within its hold. The navigators did not just move goods, they mastered the geography of secrecy. Along the rugged Cypriot coastline, they identified and developed hidden coves and secluded beaches, places where a ship could slip in under darkness, unload its illicit cargo directly to waiting agents, and be gone before the first light of dawn. Can you feel the tension of those nights, the creak of the ship, the whispered commands, the constant fear of discovery that must have haunted every voyage? Their courage was matched only by their ingenuity, a testament to the human drive to connect and to profit, no matter the risk. But once their precious cargo was safely ashore, a new set of challenges began, handled by a different kind of operator entirely. Far from the coast, another set of hands ensured the contraband reached its final destination. These were the inland facilitators, the caravan masters and warehouse operators who moved the smuggled treasures through the heartlands of empires, right under the noses of royal inspectors. Their world was one of dusty roads and calculated risks, where a single misstep could unravel an entire operation. As archaeologist Cyprian Broodbank explains, their greatest asset was an intimate knowledge of the landscape and the complex local politics that governed it. They knew which mountain passes were least watched, which desert tracks could conceal a caravan, and which local chieftain could be persuaded, with a bit of silver, to grant safe passage through their territory. Their tactics were a masterclass in subtle deception. High-value goods like carved ivory or rare spices would be carefully hidden within shipments of common goods, perhaps buried beneath sacks of grain or packed inside cheap pottery. They established a network of secret storage depots, unmarked caves or remote farmhouses where goods could be held until the coast was clear. allowing them to control the flow into the market and avoid flooding it, which would drive down prices. Their interactions with border guards were a delicate dance. A facilitator would never bribe a guard directly. That would be far too risky. Instead, they worked through trusted intermediaries, local merchants, or even minor officials who could vouch for the caravan's legitimate contents and smooth over any inconvenient questions with a discreet payment. A compelling case from the Hittite Empire shows just how valuable this trade was. Iron was a fiercely controlled substance, a metal so strategically important that the Hittite kings tried to monopolize its production. Yet, through these hidden overland networks, Hittite iron ore was smuggled into regions like Mesopotamia, where it was forged into prized weapons and tools for those who could afford the black market price. Can you fathom the immense trust required to sustain such a chain, where dozens of people across hundreds of miles had to remain silent, their loyalty secured only by the promise of shared profit? This entire shadow economy, from the merchant's office to the sailor's ship to the caravan master's route, generated records, but not the kind we can easily read. Their secrets are locked away in scripts that have defied translation for centuries. A clay tablet rests in the dust, its surface etched with lines and symbols that have stubbornly guarded their meaning for over 3,000 years. These are the undeciphered scripts of the Bronze Age, silent witnesses to a world of trade and intrigue. While the smugglers and their secret deals are long gone, their records may still exist, locked away in languages like Linear from Crete and Cypro-Minoan from Cyprus. The challenge for scholars is immense. Without a Rosetta Stone, a bilingual text that provides a key, these writings remain a profound mystery. They could be elaborate accounting systems, lists of goods moved through the black market, or even coded messages meant to conceal the true nature of a transaction from prying eyes. The work of linguist John Chadwick on Linear B demonstrates the revolutionary power of decipherment. Once that script was cracked, it revealed not epic poetry, but meticulous palace inventories, lists of chariot wheels, textiles, and offerings to the gods. This suggests that other undeciphered scripts might hold similar economic data, potentially exposing the hidden flow of untaxed copper, illegal ivory, and smuggled silver. Consider the strange case of the Phaistos disc, a clay circle from Crete stamped with mysterious symbols on both sides. Some researchers argue its spiral of pictograms could be a trader's ledger, a list of commodities and their quantities. Others see it as a religious hymn or a board game. Without context, we simply cannot know. Each of these scripts is tied to a crucial location. Linear is found across Minoan Crete, a seafaring culture at the heart of Aegean trade networks. Cypro-Minoan comes from Cyprus, the island that was the primary source of copper, the era's most vital metal. Is it a coincidence that these unreadable texts cluster in the very hubs we suspect were central to the shadow economy? The possibility is tantalizing. These symbols might not just represent words, but a specialized trade jargon, a kind of ancient shorthand known only to a closed circle of merchants and their most trusted agents. What knowledge have we lost? The true scale of these illicit networks, the names of the master smugglers, and perhaps even their private motivations could be recorded on these tablets, waiting for the right key to unlock their stories. And as these written mysteries persist, so too does the physical evidence of a world in chaos, pointing toward the great cataclysm that would sweep this entire system away. The silence of the deep sea holds more truth than 1,000 royal archives. Off the coast of Turkey, at a place called Uluburun, a sunken ship rested on the seabed for over 3,000 years, a perfectly preserved time capsule of Bronze Age trade. When archaeologists led by Semel Pulak began its meticulous excavation, they uncovered not just a vessel but a story. The ship's hull was a treasure chest of staggering diversity, packed with 10 tons of Cypriot copper ingots, a ton of tin, African ebony, Canaanite jewelry, and delicate glass beads. This was not a simple cargo from point A to point B. It was a floating bazaar, a collection of goods from at least 7 different cultures, from Mycenaean Greece to the far reaches of Mesopotamia. Such a mix is the hallmark of complex, possibly covert, exchanges. A royal ship would typically carry a more homogeneous official cargo. This collection suggests something else entirely, a network of individual deals and private ventures operating alongside, or even outside, palace control. Look closer at the artifacts, and the shadow of the black market begins to take shape. Consider the elephant tusks and the hippopotamus teeth. Ivory was a luxury item in incredibly high demand, often subject to royal monopolies or heavy tariffs. Its presence here, alongside raw metals, hints at a shipment intended to bypass official channels. The same is true for the cobalt blue glass ingots, a precursor to glassmaking that was as valuable as precious stones. These were not bulk commodities but high-value, low-volume items perfect for smuggling, easily hidden and offering enormous profit margins. Perhaps the most human clue comes from the collection of personal seals found on board. These were the ancient signatures of merchants, each one representing a different individual with a stake in the cargo. This points away from a single, state-sponsored mission and toward a consortium of private traders, each using the ship to move their own goods, some of which may have been strictly off the books. What does this sunken vessel tell us about the true scale of the underground economy? The Uluburun wreck is not an anomaly. It is a snapshot of normal commerce at the end of the Bronze Age, revealing a world where legitimate trade and illicit deals were seamlessly intertwined. The sheer value of the cargo, the diversity of its origins, and the personal nature of its ownership all point to a system that was far more complex and decentralized than the official records of kings and pharaohs would have us believe. This was not a few rogue merchants operating on the fringes. This was a fundamental part of the economic engine. How many other ships, now lost to time, carried similar mixed cargoes, their secrets dissolving in the salt water? The Uluburun ship gives us proof, but it also raises a deeper question about the economy that made such a voyage not just possible, but profitable. What forces of supply and demand could create a system so robust that it required its own secret maritime routes? Buried in the sun-baked ruins of a pharaoh's capital, a library of clay tablets tells a story of polite outrage and veiled accusations. These are the Amarna letters, the diplomatic correspondence of the Egyptian court, and within their formal greetings and flattering phrases, we find the faint but unmistakable fingerprints of the black market. Historian William L. Moran's translations reveal a world where kings and governors wrote to each other not just about alliances and marriages, but about shipments that went missing and merchants who operated without permission. The tension is palpable. On one hand, you have the state-controlled trade, the official gifts between royal brothers meant to reinforce political bonds. On the other, a persistent undercurrent of private enterprise that these very rulers seemed unable to stop. A perfect example is the prized blue stone, lapis lazuli. Mined only in a remote region of Afghanistan, its journey to Egypt was long and perilous, making it incredibly valuable. In one letter, the pharaoh complains to a Canaanite ruler about a shipment of this precious stone that never arrived, strongly implying it was intercepted and diverted by enterprising merchants for private sale. This was not a simple theft, it was a sophisticated rerouting of royal wealth into the shadow economy. The letters are filled with such grievances, rulers accusing each other's subjects of trading without the proper authorizations, of taking goods that were meant for the palace and selling them on the side. Can you sense the frustration in these ancient words, the powerlessness of a king who commands armies but cannot control the flow of goods through his own ports? These diplomatic missives expose a fundamental truth: the official economy and the black market were not separate worlds. They were deeply intertwined, each feeding off the other. The very existence of these complaints proves how widespread and brazen these unofficial exchanges had become. It sets the stage for a much larger question: what happens when this shadow economy grows so powerful that it begins to destabilize the very empires it secretly serves? The price of tin could make or break an empire. Across the Bronze Age world, the fundamental economic equation was simple: bronze meant power, and bronze required tin. When official supplies from distant sources like Afghanistan dwindled, or when royal taxes made the metal prohibitively expensive, a powerful incentive was created. This was the perfect environment for the black market to thrive. Economist Morris Silver describes how vast price disparities between regions acted like a magnet, pulling smuggled goods along hidden routes where the potential profit outweighed the considerable risk. A merchant could buy tin in a region where it was relatively plentiful, bypass the royal customs officials, and sell it in a desperate market for 3 or 4 times the original price. The same principle applied to other luxury goods, from Lebanese cedar wood for grand construction projects to the vibrant purple dye derived from murex snails, a color that screamed status and wealth. Think of it like a modern luxury item with a limited supply, where high demand and restrictive tariffs inevitably create a counterfeit or smuggling ring. The economics of scarcity were not the only driver. Political conflicts often led to embargoes where one kingdom would officially ban trade with another. Yet the demand for goods did not disappear. These political rifts simply forced trade underground, enriching the very smugglers who could navigate the new, treacherous landscape. A clear example comes from the Mycenaean Greek world. Archaeological evidence suggests periods of severe local shortage in metals. Yet somehow, bronze objects continued to be produced and used by the elite. This points directly to covert import networks, secret deals that brought in the necessary tin and copper from outside the sanctioned channels, keeping the wheels of industry and status turning. Is this dynamic not visible today when sanctions on a nation often lead to a booming shadow economy for coveted goods? The relentless engine of this system was elite consumption. As cities grew and palaces became more magnificent, the competition among nobles and rulers intensified. To display your power, you needed the finest ivory, the rarest dyes, the most ornate jewelry. This insatiable hunger for status symbols created a constant, high-value demand that the official, taxed economy could not always satisfy quickly or cheaply enough. The black market was not an aberration. It was a direct and logical response to the pressures of the legitimate economy. But moving high-value contraband across land and sea required more than just economic opportunity. It demanded a web of trusted accomplices operating in plain sight. A successful smuggling ring relied on a currency far older than silver or gold, the unbreakable bonds of social trust. Beyond the secret codes and coded messages, the true foundation of the Bronze Age black market was a sprawling, invisible web of relationships connecting merchants, sailors, artisans, and even corrupt officials across vast empires. Anthropologist David W. Anthony notes that in a world without formal contracts, shared cultural identity was the ultimate safeguard. Kinship and a common ethnic background created an immediate, powerful bond of loyalty. You were far less likely to betray a cousin or a member of your own tribe because the consequences would exile you from your entire community, a fate often worse than any royal punishment. These alliances were meticulously reinforced through powerful social mechanisms. Oath-taking rituals sworn before gods made a business agreement a sacred pact. Strategic intermarriages between powerful merchant families in different city-states wove their commercial interests together, creating a network of in-laws who could be trusted to move goods discreetly across political borders. Think of the Levantine merchant families operating out of cities like Ugarit. Their family branches were established in Egypt, Cyprus, and Anatolia, forming a ready-made, trustworthy distribution network that was largely immune to the shifting rivalries between kings. A person's social capital, their reputation for reliability, and their extensive family connections was often more valuable than the contents of their warehouse. Can you see how this system of mutual obligation created a shadow society, one that operated with its own rules and its own fierce code of honor? This clever use of social structures even extended into the highest levels of diplomacy. Hittite texts recount how certain envoys, protected by diplomatic immunity, were suspected of using their protected status to move contraband goods right past customs inspections. Their official scrolls and sealed pouches may have hidden more than just messages from one king to another. How different is this, really, from the insider networks that enable modern corporate espionage or political scandals? The human impulse to form trusted circles for mutual gain appears to be a timeless constant. And just as these social networks provided the framework for secrecy, a suite of ingenious low-tech tools gave these alliances the means to operate with stunning efficiency. The smuggler's greatest weapon was not a sword, but a cleverly modified clay jar. Bronze Age smugglers were masters of low-tech innovation, transforming everyday objects into sophisticated tools of deception. To evade the eyes of royal inspectors, they perfected the art of concealment. Archaeological experiments reveal how amphorae, the standard shipping containers of the era, could be crafted with false bottoms, creating a hidden space between the inner and outer walls. A seemingly full jar of olive oil or grain might secretly contain a stash of carved ivory tusks or packets of rare purple dye. Weighted sacks were another common trick, where common stones were sewn into the bottom of a bag, while precious goods like uncut gemstones or silver ingots were nestled safely on top, out of sight during a cursory inspection. The ingenuity extended to the ships themselves. Hulls could be designed with concealed compartments below the waterline, accessible only from a hidden hatch in the captain's quarters, a perfect place to store high-value contraband like tin or lapis lazuli during a port inspection. Can you envision the tense moments as an inspector tapped on amphorae, listening for the hollow sound that would give away a secret compartment? This cat-and-mouse game required not just hiding goods, but also disguising their very nature. The science of metallurgy was co-opted for fraud. Unscrupulous artisans learned to plate cheap copper with a thin layer of valuable silver, creating counterfeit bars that could pass a visual check. They might even file off the distinctive markings on a copper ingot from a royal mine, re-stamping it with a different, less scrutinized symbol to avoid detection and taxes. On the island of Crete, Minoan artisans became experts in designing for portability. They created luxury items that were inherently easy to smuggle, like intricately carved seal stones that could be palmed in a hand, or fine textiles that could be tightly folded into a small, unremarkable bundle. These were the high-profit, low-bulk goods that fueled the shadow economy. Even early writing systems were likely employed as tools of the trade. A merchant's tablet detailing shipments of wool and barley could, using a pre-arranged code, secretly communicate the arrival of a smuggled shipment of weapons or the location of a secret drop point. The most crucial technological advance, however, was maritime. Smugglers favored smaller, faster vessels with a shallow draft, allowing them to navigate up rivers and into hidden coves where the large, sluggish ships of the Royal Navy could not follow. Their entire operation was a testament to human cunning. a quiet rebellion against control that reshaped cultures through the silent movement of forbidden treasures. The most exclusive Bronze Age banquet was a gallery of contraband. A local chieftain raises a silver cup, its design echoing distant Aegean styles, while his wife wears a necklace of Egyptian faience beads that never passed through a royal customs house. These unauthorized imports did more than display wealth, they silently rewrote local culture. The Bronze Age black market was a powerful, unintended engine of cultural exchange, spreading artistic ideas, religious symbols, and even words across the Mediterranean faster than any official embassy ever could. Historian Susan Sherratt observed that smuggled luxury items often served as the prototype for new local styles. An artisan who had never left his village would see a beautifully carved ivory box from Syria, its surface etched with mythical creatures, and he would incorporate those foreign motifs into his own pottery designs. This was not a formal artistic lesson, it was cultural osmosis through illicit channels. The spread of religious symbols is a clear example. Egyptian scarabs, small beetle-shaped amulets, became wildly popular across the Levant and the Aegean. While some were official gifts, many more traveled through unofficial networks, carried by merchants who sold them to people eager to adopt the powerful magic of a foreign god. The same happened with Mesopotamian cylinder seals, intricate stone rollers used to mark ownership. Their complex mythological scenes were copied by local craftsmen, blending alien gods with familiar spirits and creating entirely new artistic traditions. This cultural borrowing was a two-way street. In Anatolia, archaeologists have uncovered Mycenaean Greek pottery and weapons in contexts that suggest they were not rare trade goods, but personal possessions, integrated into the local culture through sustained, covert contact. This was not a single shipment lost at sea, but a steady, unofficial trickle of ideas. Can you envision the conversations that must have happened? The questions about the strange symbols on a smuggled seal or the proper way to use an exotic spice. These interactions, born from a simple commercial transaction, subtly reshaped languages, diets, and beliefs. What would the art of the ancient world have looked like without this shadowy network of cultural delivery? The very diversity we admire in museum collections was in part a product of these unauthorized exchanges. Yet this vibrant cultural leakage was precisely what the great empires sought to control, leading them to draft the first anti-smuggling laws in human history. A royal decree carved in stone promised swift punishment for any smuggler caught evading the king's share. Yet these laws, etched with absolute authority, were often powerless against the tide of illicit trade. Across the Bronze Age world, states erected a legal framework designed to control commerce and crush the black market. The Assyrian Empire, for instance, established a network of customs posts at key river crossings and mountain passes, staffed by inspectors whose job was to scrutinize every caravan and levy the required tariff. Scholar Mario Liverani notes that these officials held clay tablets listing taxable goods, from metals to textiles, comparing them against a merchant's declared cargo. The penalties for deception were severe. A smuggler in Hittite lands could face crippling fines, the confiscation of his entire fortune, or even enslavement. In Egypt, circumventing the Nile checkpoints could be treated as a crime against the state itself, punishable by forced labor or execution. But the sheer scale of the territory made consistent enforcement a fantasy. A handful of officials could not possibly search every ship on the Mediterranean or every camel on the desert track. This systemic weakness was compounded by a timeless problem: corruption. A customs inspector earning a modest salary was often easily persuaded to look the other way for a discreet pouch of silver, making him not a barrier to the black market, but a paid participant. Egyptian records preserve the story of a merchant caught trying to hide rings of precious electrum inside hollowed-out loaves of bread. His arrest was a minor victory in an endless game, one that highlighted the fundamental mismatch between royal ambition and on-the-ground reality. Can any law truly be effective when the people hired to enforce it have more to gain by breaking it? This ancient struggle between central control and local corruption feels strikingly familiar, a reminder that the challenge of policing illicit trade is as old as civilization itself. With royal authority stretched so thin, the stage was set for a far greater disruption, one that would arrive from the sea and test the very survival of these empires. The sea brought not only raiders but also merchants in disguise. For generations, the Sea Peoples have been cast as the ultimate villains of the Bronze Age collapse, a faceless horde of invaders whose ships burned cities from Greece to Egypt. Yet what if their story is far more complex, a tale of economic opportunism woven with outright violence? Archaeologist Trude Dothan's work in the Levant reveals a puzzling portrait. At sites like Ashdod, artifacts associated with these seafarers appear not just in layers of destruction, but in contexts of peaceful settlement and local trade. This suggests some groups may have switched seamlessly between the roles of pirate and smuggler, their identity shaped by the opportunity of the moment. When palace control crumbled and official trade routes faltered, these maritime networks were perfectly positioned to fill the void, moving goods through the chaos for anyone who could pay. Consider the Egyptian reliefs at Medinet Habu, which famously depict these warriors in pitched naval battles. Look closer and the details are telling. Their ships are not mere warships, but vessels capable of carrying substantial cargo, their design suited for long voyages and heavy loads. The reliefs celebrate a military victory, but they silently acknowledge an economic reality. These were people who lived on and from the sea, and their livelihood demanded more than just plunder. Could the very disruption they were accused of causing have been their greatest business opportunity? In the power vacuum left by fallen empires, the Sea Peoples may have acted as ruthless intermediaries, controlling the flow of essential materials like metals and luxury goods through newly fragmented markets. Evidence from Cyprus supports this. The island, a vital source of copper, shows signs of both conflict and coexistence with these groups. Imported pottery styles and metal objects appear alongside local goods, indicating not just destruction but also exchange. A community does not trade with its destroyers, it trades with its suppliers. This paints a picture of a confederation that was as much a network as a navy, a decentralized web of clans and families who understood that a clandestine trade deal could often be more profitable and certainly less risky than a direct assault on a fortified city. So were they destroyers of worlds or suppliers to a shadow economy? Perhaps they were both. Their legacy a reminder that in times of crisis, the line between a warlord and a merchant prince can vanish entirely. A ship flying the flag of no kingdom could trade where others dared not sail. This was the hidden advantage of the Sea Peoples, whose naval mobility became a perfect instrument for the black market in an age of collapsing empires. Unbound by loyalty to any pharaoh or Hittite king, these seafarers could navigate the political chaos, delivering vital goods to buyers cut off from official supply lines. The military historian Robert L. O'Connell observes that for such groups, the line between raiding and trading was never fixed. It was a simple calculation of risk and reward. A fortified port might be too strong to attack, but its merchants, desperate for copper or tin, would pay a premium for a secret delivery under the cover of night. Their deep knowledge of coastal inlets and open sea routes, once used for surprise attacks, now served a more lucrative purpose, moving contraband across a Mediterranean where the old rules no longer applied. The archaeological record offers compelling clues. Along the coast of ancient Canaan, settlements show layers of destruction, but also levels of peaceful habitation containing pottery and tools linked to Sea Peoples' cultures. This suggests they did not just burn cities and leave, they sometimes stayed, interacting with local populations and likely integrating into existing smuggling circuits. The shipwrecks themselves tell a story of mixed motives. While no vessel has been definitively labeled a Sea Peoples ship, wrecks from this turbulent period often carry a confusing jumble of cargo, from weapons to luxury goods, the kind of assortment you would expect from traders who also served as their own protection. A telling case emerges from Cyprus. The island was the primary source of copper for the entire region, a metal so crucial its trade was tightly controlled by palace authorities. Yet, in the late Bronze Age, new types of pottery and metalwork appear, styles associated with these maritime groups. This points not to a simple invasion, but to a more complex relationship. Could the Sea Peoples have been negotiating with local Cypriot smiths or corrupt officials, moving copper outside of royal monopolies to sell on the black market? Their ships became floating warehouses of opportunity, carrying whatever would turn the highest profit, whether seized in a raid or bartered in a hidden cove. Does this not blur the very definitions we use, forcing us to see these figures not as mindless destroyers, but as adaptable economic actors? In a world coming apart, their greatest weapon may not have been the sword, but their willingness to do business with anyone. This fusion of commerce and conflict inevitably touched something deeper, drawing upon the divine to sanctify the secrets of the trade. A temple storeroom held more than just the god's treasures. It concealed a priest's private deal. In the flickering lamplight, a holy man might quietly accept a shipment of unmarked ivory or a crate of foreign wine, offerings that never appeared on the official temple ledger. This was the subtle intersection of faith and the black market, where spiritual authority could provide the perfect cover for illicit trade. Temples were not just houses of worship, they were economic powerhouses, repositories of grain, precious metals, and luxury goods. As archaeologist Colin Renfrew notes, this concentration of wealth made religious centers natural nodes in unofficial networks, their sacred status offering a degree of protection from prying royal inspectors. Who would dare to thoroughly search a god's own treasury? This system enabled a particularly sensitive form of smuggling, the trade in sacred objects. A cult statue from a distant land, believed to hold immense power, or a set of rare ritual vessels could command a fortune on the black market. Their spiritual significance did not diminish their material value, it amplified it. In Canaanite shrines along the coast, archaeologists have uncovered imported figurines and ceremonial items that do not match local styles. These foreign objects, found far from any official trade route, suggest covert exchanges between priests and merchants, a quiet agreement to acquire powerful divine symbols outside of state-controlled channels. Even our myths echo this reality. The Greek tale of the theft of the Palladium, the sacred statue of Athena believed to protect the city of Troy, reflects a deep-seated ancient anxiety about the smuggling of holy relics. The story underscores a terrifying truth that a city's divine protection could literally be packed into a crate and sold to the highest bidder. Can you fathom the moral conflict a priest must have faced, balancing his duty to the divine with the tangible, worldly power that smuggled wealth could bring? His congregation saw a pious leader, but his private ledger told a story of calculated risk and spiritual compromise. This shadow economy, woven into the very fabric of faith, was ultimately at the mercy of a far greater, unpredictable force, the changing climate of the ancient world itself. A sudden drought could unravel an empire's entire supply chain, When the rains failed and crops withered in the fields, the official trade networks that depended on agricultural surplus began to fray. This environmental pressure created a powerful new driver for the black market, one based not on greed for luxuries, but on sheer desperation for survival. Paleoclimatologist Harvey Weiss points to a prolonged period of aridity around the 12th century before the Common Era, a mega-drought that stretched from Greece to Mesopotamia. As granaries emptied and famine took hold, the price of basic foodstuffs like grain and olive oil skyrocketed. This was the moment the smugglers pivoted. Where they once moved ivory and silver, they now risked everything to transport sacks of barley and jugs of oil across borders, selling to the highest bidder in starving cities and turning scarcity into immense profit. Natural disasters on a colossal scale reshaped the very geography of trade. The cataclysmic eruption of the Thera volcano, for instance, did not just bury a Minoan town. It sent tsunamis across the eastern Mediterranean and choked the skies with ash for years. Official sea lanes were suddenly treacherous or impassable, and royal patrols were overwhelmed with relief efforts. In this chaos, the unofficial couriers found their opening. Smugglers with their nimble boats and secret knowledge of the coast could navigate the new, dangerous realities where the large, state-sponsored ships could not. They became the only link to isolated communities, delivering essential supplies and rarefied luxuries at a time when central authority had temporarily vanished. Can you envision the world reshuffled overnight, where a force of nature erased the old rules and handed power to those who operated in the shadows? To avoid the eyes of kings, merchants charted paths through the world's most forbidding landscapes. They favored the mountain pass where a single lookout could spot a royal patrol from miles away, and the desert track where their caravan's footprints would be erased by the shifting sands by morning. These were the unofficial arteries of the Bronze Age, routes defined by their difficulty, chosen specifically because no tax official would bother to station himself there. The trade in frankincense and myrrh from the Arabian Peninsula provides a perfect case study. These aromatic resins were worth their weight in silver, creating a huge incentive to avoid the heavy taxes imposed at official oases and border forts. So the caravans diverted, pushing through the brutal, waterless stretches of the empty quarter, guided by clans who knew the secrets of the dunes. Their success meant that the sacred incense burning in Egyptian temples or Hittite palaces might have arrived not on a royal docket, but through a grueling, clandestine journey across a sun-scorched hellscape. Does this ancient relationship between a changing climate and a booming shadow economy feel strangely familiar today? When modern shipping lanes are disrupted by extreme weather or rising sea levels, we see the same patterns emerge with alternative, often illicit, networks rising to meet demand. The fundamental human response to scarcity and blocked official channels appears unchanged by the millennia. And within these resilient, secretive networks operating in the harsh mountains and vast deserts, a surprising group often held critical influence: the women who managed the trade from within the walls of their own homes. Her seal on a clay tablet was as binding as any king's decree. While official histories celebrated the deeds of male rulers and warriors, the shadow economy of the Bronze Age often hummed with the quiet, decisive influence of women. Operating from within the domestic sphere or the sanctity of temples, they possessed unique access and social cover that made them indispensable to covert trade networks. Historian Sarah B. Pomeroy's work illuminates how women in antiquity frequently engaged in economic activities that, while unofficial, were crucial to their family's wealth and status. A merchant's wife, for instance, could discreetly manage a hidden storeroom in her own home, a place where illicit goods like unmarked copper ingots or contraband textiles could be held safely away from the prying eyes of royal inspectors. Her social visits and participation in religious festivals provided the perfect pretext for exchanging information or negotiating deals without ever raising suspicion. The temple itself offered another powerful platform. A priestess entrusted with the god's treasury could easily conceal a few extra ivory tusks or jars of rare perfume among the sacred offerings, her spiritual authority acting as a powerful shield against a routine inventory check. Can you see the strategic advantage of a figure everyone perceived as above reproach, quietly directing the flow of forbidden wealth? Concrete evidence for their involvement surfaces in surviving Hittite texts, which document women acting as financiers and traders in metals, providing the capital or connections necessary to move valuable cargo. Even personal adornments played a role. The intricate gold jewelry found in women's tombs may have been more than just display. It could have served as a compact, high-value currency for smuggling, easily concealed on one's person and universally accepted. A telling legal record from the city of Ugarit recounts the case of a woman formerly accused of trafficking in stolen high-quality textiles. This was not a minor domestic dispute, but a serious commercial crime, implicating her in a sophisticated operation that moved luxury goods outside official channels. How many other women, their stories now lost, were the unseen architects of these clandestine deals, their contributions erased by the passage of time? Their success in this hidden world demonstrates that the black market was not a male-only arena, but a system that leveraged every available resource, including the unique social and domestic power wielded by women. This pervasive, adaptable network of illicit exchange, however, was quietly weaving the threads of its own eventual downfall. The lifeblood of a kingdom seeped away, one untaxed copper ingot at a time. For empires like the Hittites and Mycenaeans, the black market was not a minor nuisance but a slow-acting poison, draining royal treasuries over generations and leaving them dangerously weak. Historian Joseph Tainter's research into societal collapse highlights a critical vulnerability. When states lose their revenue streams, their ability to respond to crises evaporates. The illicit trade in metals and luxuries directly undermined this financial foundation. Every shipment of tin that slipped past a customs post was a direct loss to the royal coffers, income that should have paid for soldiers, granaries, and public works. This erosion of funds fostered a deeper sickness: systemic corruption. Local governors, tempted by a share of the smugglers' profit, would turn a blind eye, their loyalty to the distant king outweighed by the tangible silver in their hands. This created a vicious cycle. As state power weakened, the black market grew stronger, further enriching the very local powers that challenged central authority. Can a kingdom survive when its own officials are financially invested in its failure? The Egyptian New Kingdom recognized the threat clearly. Pharaohs issued stern decrees, carved for all to see, explicitly forbidding the smuggling of goods like gold and precious woods out of Nubia. These were not mere proclamations, they were desperate attempts to staunch the bleeding of vital resources. The problem became catastrophic during the late Bronze Age collapse. When drought and famine struck, the official supply chains for grain and metals shattered. But the shadow networks, nimble and decentralized, adapted and survived. They continued to move resources, but now they sold only to those who could pay the highest price, bypassing the state entirely. This meant that while royal armies starved and foundries stood silent for lack of bronze, local warlords and independent merchant princes could afford to arm their own followers. The very tools needed for imperial recovery were being hoarded by the black market, making a return to stability nearly impossible. The fall of the great palaces was not a single event, but the final result of centuries of economic decay. a decay silently accelerated by the relentless flow of contraband. What does this tell us about the fragility of even the most powerful states when faced with a parallel economy? The answer may lie not in crumbling walls, but in the quiet evidence of a ship's cargo resting for 3,000 years on the seafloor. The seafloor preserves what kings tried to erase. Modern archaeology is now peeling back those layers of silt and time, revealing the physical evidence of the Bronze Age black market with stunning clarity. At sites like Tel Kabri in Israel, archaeologist Asaf Yasser Landau and his team have uncovered a palace with a story to tell, not in its grand halls, but in its hidden spaces. Within the walls of a storage room, they found a carefully concealed stash of Minoan-style pottery, high-quality drinking sets that did not belong with the local Canaanite wares. This was not a random collection. It was a private, unofficial stockpile, likely used in the kind of elite gift-giving that bypassed official tribute systems and forged personal alliances outside of royal control. Such a discovery rewrites our understanding of the palace economy, suggesting it was perforated with back channels and private deals. The real revolution, however, lies not just in what we find, but in how we can now analyze it. Advanced residue analysis can detect microscopic traces of substances left inside pottery vessels after 3,000 years. A simple-looking jar, officially listed as containing common oil, might reveal chemical signatures of smuggled opium or rare, expensive resins from distant lands. This scientific window allows us to catch the ancient smuggler in a lie told millennia ago. Can you grasp the power of this? The ability to read the true contents of a cargo that was deliberately mislabeled to cheat a tax collector. Underwater archaeology adds another dimension to this detective work. Each new shipwreck is a frozen moment in time, and their cargo mixes are often deeply anomalous. A single vessel might carry precious ivory, standard trade goods, and a hidden compartment of unmarked copper ingots, their origins deliberately obscured by having their royal seals filed off. This is the signature of a mixed economy where legitimate commerce provided the perfect camouflage for illicit wealth. On the island of Sardinia, archaeologists have uncovered vast, deliberately hidden hoards of bronze artifacts buried far from any settlement. These were not ritual offerings. The sheer weight and value of the metal and the context of their concealment point to a different purpose. These were likely the secret stockpiles of metal traders, buried to avoid confiscation by desperate local authorities or rival groups during a time of extreme instability. Each of these discoveries acts like a single pixel, gradually forming a high-resolution picture of a world we once only guessed at. They prove that the shadow economy was not a minor footnote, but a central, driving force in the ancient Mediterranean. With every artifact unearthed and every residue analyzed, we are forced to confront a deeper question about our own role in interpreting this clandestine past. A single artifact can shatter a revered historical narrative. Behind the quiet work of archaeology lies a landscape of profound ethical dilemmas, where every interpretation carries the weight of rewriting history. Picture a scholar holding a clay tablet that suggests a celebrated pharaoh, long praised for his piety, was secretly profiting from the very smuggling networks he publicly condemned. To publish such a finding would ignite a firestorm, challenging established reputations and national identities. This is the tightrope walked by researchers of the Bronze Age black market, where evidence is often circumstantial and the line between insight and overreach is dangerously thin. The responsibility is immense. Archaeologist Lynn Meskel emphasizes the crucial need to avoid projecting modern judgments onto ancient actions. What we might label as criminal smuggling was, in its own time, often seen as savvy commerce or a necessary act of survival. Applying our contemporary moral framework risks distorting the past, turning complex historical actors into simplistic villains or heroes. This challenge is compounded by the constant threat of sensationalism. A theory linking the Sea Peoples to a vast pirate consortium is far more headline-grabbing than a nuanced conclusion about climate-induced migration. Yet the simpler story can eclipse the more complex, evidence-based truth. How do we present the shadowy past without letting the shadows distort our vision? The physical evidence itself is under constant threat. The looting of archaeological sites is a direct assault on history, driven by the same hunger for profit that fueled the ancient black market. When a tomb is ransacked for its gold, the context is destroyed forever. That lost context, the surrounding pottery, the position of the body, the specific location of the artifact, is often more valuable to understanding than the object itself. It is the difference between finding a single beautiful sentence and reading the entire book. This destruction forces researchers to work with a fragmented record, making their task of ethical interpretation even more difficult. The dilemma extends into the present day, into collaborations with local communities. In regions where modern economic hardship still drives illicit digging, an archaeologist must navigate a sensitive path. Announcing the discovery of a major smuggling hub from antiquity could bring welcome tourism, but it could also glamorize illegal activities or stir tensions with communities for whom such topics are a painful part of their heritage. An anecdote from the study of the Sea Peoples serves as a stark warning. Throughout history, various nationalist movements have co-opted these mysterious sea raiders, portraying them as ancient analogues to modern invaders to justify political agendas. This misuse of history demonstrates how easily archaeological theories can be weaponized, turning academic debate into a tool for division. It forces us to ask, who does history truly serve? The pursuit of knowledge must be tempered with a deep respect for the past and for the people connected to it in the present. As we assemble these fragile pieces of evidence, we are compelled to look beyond the Mediterranean, to see if this shadow economy was a unique phenomenon or part of a much larger, repeating pattern in human history. The tactics of the Bronze Age smuggler echo through 1,000 years of history. This shadow economy was not an isolated event but a recurring pattern, a fundamental feature of human civilization that reappears whenever centralized power meets high demand. Placing the Bronze Age black market on a broader timeline reveals startling constants across millennia. In the Roman Empire, for instance, the state's notorious grain dole created a massive incentive for corruption, with officials and merchants colluding to divert public supplies into private hands, a scheme that would have felt entirely familiar to a merchant in Ugarit. Historian Peter Temmen's analysis of ancient economies shows that while the scale and technology changed, the core drivers remained stubbornly the same: the exploitation of price disparities, the circumvention of state monopolies, and the relentless demand for both luxuries and essentials. The methods of evasion display a remarkable consistency. Just as Bronze Age merchants used coded messages on clay tablets, smugglers along the medieval Silk Road developed complex argots and secret hand signals to negotiate deals for Chinese silk and spices right under the noses of Mongol authorities. The use of hidden compartments, seen in the amphorae of the Mediterranean, was perfected by Roman wine smugglers and later by traders moving forbidden goods past customs houses in the Age of Sail. The social structures underpinning these networks are perhaps the most enduring parallel. The kinship-based trust of Bronze Age merchant families finds its mirror in the guild-like secrecy of medieval smuggling rings or the clan-based operations of pirates in the Caribbean. These were not random criminals, but sophisticated organizations built on loyalty and mutual profit, operating in the gap between law and desire. Consider a specific case from classical Greece, where the city-state of Athens imposed strict controls on the export of its famed olive oil. Much like Cypriot copper, this valuable commodity was funneled into clandestine trade, with merchants secretly shipping amphorae to rival states, disguising their origins by scraping off the official seals. The economic playbook was identical to that of the Bronze Age: exploit scarcity, avoid tariffs, and profit handsomely from forbidden trade. Even the role of environmental crisis repeats itself. The mega-droughts that strained Bronze Age kingdoms have their counterpart in the Little Ice Age of the 14th century, which caused crop failures across Europe and spurred a rampant black market in grain, a desperate trade in survival that overshadowed the trade in luxuries. When you trace this thread from the sunken ships of the Bronze Age to the hidden warehouses of the Roman world and the covert deals on the Silk Road, what enduring human truths do these shadow economies reveal? They show us that the drive to trade, to connect, and to profit is a force that laws and empires have always struggled to contain. This timeless dance between control and freedom did not just shape economies, it also seeped into the stories we tell about gods and heroes, blurring the line between historical fact and legendary tale. A hero's greatest theft might immortalize a smuggler's cleverest trick. The daring voyages and covert acquisitions celebrated in ancient mythology often read like romanticized accounts of the Bronze Age black market, blurring the line between criminal enterprise and legendary adventure. As classicist Timothy Gantz suggests, tales like Jason and the Argonauts are not merely about heroism. They are allegories for high-risk trade voyages into the Black Sea, a region known for its rich gold deposits and perilous waters. Jason's quest for the Golden Fleece mirrors the real-life journeys of merchants seeking untaxed, high-value commodities, their success dependent on the same resourcefulness and trickery that smugglers relied upon to bypass royal monopolies. These stories glorify the very traits necessary to thrive in the shadow economy, turning audacious theft into a celebrated cultural virtue. The pattern repeats across cultures. In the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh, the hero travels to a distant, divine garden to retrieve a plant that grants eternal youth, a classic tale of acquiring a rare, powerful resource from a guarded source. This echoes the illicit trade in rare botanicals and medicinal plants, substances so valuable their origins were often shrouded in secrecy and their transport required stealth. The myth does not condemn the act as simple theft, but frames it as a monumental achievement, a narrative that would resonate deeply with audiences familiar with the covert acquisition of forbidden goods. Can you see how these legendary feats preserve the memory of real-world economic struggles, transforming the smuggler's risky profession into the stuff of epic poetry? These narratives served a dual purpose. They entertained while also encoding practical knowledge about alternative routes and the value of cunning over brute force. They taught each new generation to admire the clever merchant who could outwit a monster or a king, because in a world of scarce resources, that cleverness meant survival and prosperity. The legends we still tell today may be the lingering echo of a thriving underground economy, its heroes and villains forever intertwined in our collective memory. A customs officer today might be surprised to learn that the smuggler's tricks she works to uncover are 3,000 years old. The strategies perfected in the Bronze Age black market offer a startlingly relevant toolkit for understanding and combating illicit trade in our own time. Policy analysts now study these ancient networks not as dusty history, but as a source of vital intelligence, revealing that the fundamental patterns of smuggling have changed remarkably little. The core drivers remain the same: exploiting price disparities, evading authority, and leveraging social trust. Modern anti-trafficking units, for instance, have found value in mapping ancient maritime routes used to move contraband copper and ivory. These same coastal inlets and secluded beaches are often favored by contemporary smugglers moving everything from counterfeit goods to restricted antiquities, proving that geography and secrecy are timeless partners. Understanding the past provides a predictive map for the present. The ancient relationship between resource scarcity and black market growth directly informs today's debates on sustainable trade. When a vital resource, whether it is Bronze Age tin or a modern rare earth mineral, becomes scarce or its trade is restricted, a shadow economy predictably emerges to fill the demand. By studying how ancient empires managed or failed to manage these pressures, we can develop more resilient and equitable systems today. How can we design supply chains that are less vulnerable to the same ancient pressures of scarcity and corruption? In the field of heritage management, this knowledge is a powerful shield. Archaeologists are now using data on ancient smuggling hubs to protect vulnerable sites from looters. If we know that a specific stretch of coastline was a hotspot for clandestine trade 3 millennia ago, the likelihood of it containing undiscovered, lootable shipwrecks is high. This allows for targeted patrols and surveillance, turning historical insight into active preservation. The very methods used to analyze residue in ancient pottery are now being refined to help customs agencies identify the true contents of suspicious modern shipments, catching today's smugglers in the same kind of lies their Bronze Age counterparts told. These are not abstract parallels, they are practical applications of ancient wisdom. The past provides a long-term laboratory of human behavior, showing us which systems foster resilience and which create vulnerability. As we equip ourselves with these lessons, we are naturally drawn to ask what new discoveries await and how the next generation of research will further illuminate this hidden world. A silent library of clay tablets may soon find its voice through artificial intelligence. Researchers are now training sophisticated algorithms to detect subtle patterns in undeciphered scripts like Linear A and Cipro Minon, searching for the grammatical rules that have eluded human scholars for generations. A successful translation could crack open the secret ledgers of the Bronze Age black market, revealing the names of forgotten merchant princes, the true quantities of their smuggled copper, and perhaps even the private contracts sealed with a hidden handshake. This is the frontier of ancient history, where technology is granting us senses sharp enough to perceive a world once invisible. Archaeologists like Brenda J. Baker foresee a revolution driven by 3 powerful tools. Advanced DNA analysis can now trace the origin of a single ivory tusk or a scrap of dyed textile back to a specific herd of elephants or a particular stretch of coastline, mapping the illicit journey of contraband with forensic precision. High-resolution satellite imagery scans desert landscapes from orbit, identifying the faint, ghostly traces of ancient caravan tracks that bypassed all official border forts, routes visible only from the sky. And complex computational modeling allows historians to simulate the ancient economy, testing how a drought in Anatolia or a pirate raid off Cyprus would have affected black market prices and redirected the flow of smuggled goods across the entire Mediterranean. Can you envision the depth of understanding that awaits when we can virtually walk these hidden paths? One ambitious project is already scanning the seabed with autonomous submarines, conducting detailed underwater surveys in the hope of discovering new shipwrecks that hold the material proof of these covert operations. Each wreck is a frozen moment, a cargo manifest written not in clay, but in preserved artifacts. Another team uses virtual reality to reconstruct the bustling port of Ugarit, allowing researchers to literally step into a simulated version of the ancient city. They can test theories in real time, observing how goods might have been diverted through back alleys and how quickly a smuggler's boat could be unloaded on a moonless night. This is not just recreation, it is a dynamic laboratory for the past. The great unanswered questions still loom large. Were the sea peoples primarily economic opportunists, or were they truly the engine of collapse? Will we ever read the private correspondence of a scribe who kept 2 sets of books, one for the palace and one for his shadowy partners? Every technological advance brings us closer to answers, yet each discovery seems to unveil a deeper layer of mystery. What forgotten ship lies buried in the sand, its hull still packed with untaxed treasures, waiting to tell its story? The echoes of ancient smugglers remind us that history is rarely a simple story of kings and conquests. We have navigated a world of cunning merchants who mastered dual identities, of sailors who braved treacherous seas not just for plunder but for profit, and of shadowy networks built on unbreakable bonds of trust. We have confronted the silent mystery of undeciphered scripts, clay tablets that may still hold the smuggler's ledger, and wrestled with the enigmatic sea peoples, whose legacy blurs the line between ruthless destroyer and savvy economic opportunist. This was an economy forged from pressure, a direct response to scarcity, heavy taxes, and the relentless elite demand for luxury. It was sustained by social ingenuity and low-tech deception, from false bottomed jars to secret mountain passes, leaving a cultural legacy that quietly reshaped art, religion, and language across the ancient world. The fundamental drivers we have uncovered, the human hunger for connection and profit, the clever circumvention of authority, the way crisis fuels shadow networks, these are not confined to the distant past. They offer a powerful lens for understanding the hidden economies that operate in our world today. Let this journey be an invitation to look closer, to question the official record, and listen for the whispers from history's hidden corners, where every artifact, every sunken ship, and every undeciphered symbol tells a deeper story of human ambition and survival. We would love to hear which part of this shadowy world captivated you most. Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you are eager for more journeys into the mysteries of our past, subscribe to continue this quest for knowledge together.